Heya, I'm Katona Rose, and this is Just the Facts Ma'am. Today we're going to talk about Alaskan Klee Kai.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
This is Whimsy. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up with dogs pretty much my whole life. So did my husband. When I was single and living on my own in the US, I had dogs. And when I moved to Canada, I watched dogs a lot. Because of where I lived and the circumstances of that move, I wasn't able to keep any pets. But that didn't really stop me from wanting to have a dog. Fast forward, I meet my husband, we get married, and it's a few months before my birthday. And he asked me if I would like to get a dog for my birthday. And I said yes. At the time, we were doing a lot of traveling in and around our families, and one particular place was quite small, to the point that when we all got together, there were people on the floor and, on the backs of couches and all over the place just trying to make space. So my default of wanting a big dog didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Why would we want a dog fighting for floor space with people? It's just silly. When I was somewhere between 1 and 2, I hung out with my uncle's Rottweilers, and I have lots and lots of pictures of me crawling on them and them herding me into corners. And, it basically developed this lack of fear in me, I think, for large animals. There's a bit of a joke within my friend circle that on my tombstone is going to be, she pat something she shouldn't have, which is true and appropriate. And I really kind of throw it back to the Rottweilers and how awesome they were. They were super well trained. They were excellently cared for. And it sort of developed in my mind what dogs are and what they can be. So Great Danes, Rotties, Wolfhounds, all of them, love all of them. But trying to fit them in a car, manageable, but trying to fit them in this tiny house that we would go to for almost all holidays, less easy. And we wanted a dog that we could take with us and that we could travel with and that we could do things with. We wanted it to be a part of our family. I knew that I didn't really want to do the puppy route. I'd raised puppies before. I had full confidence that I could do it, but I was a newlywed and we were figuring out our lives as husband and wife, and I didn't really want to focus too hard on raising a baby, even though it wouldn't be a human baby. So we knew we had to go smaller than big, and we knew that we wanted to go older. I like a lot of small dogs. I like the look of them. I like visiting them. I like other people's, but I know that my lifestyle and the lifestyle they would wish to have doesn't line up very well. And that's a big part of what I believe. I do think that there's a time and a place for adoption, and I do think it's awful that any animal should have to be killed just because there's no one to take it in. But I also really disagree with the idea that people breeding two animals together or two wild animals breeding together just because they have the right parts is better than a purpose-bred animal that has been ethically raised and ethically bred for generations is worse. I have a really hard time with that. I think that the health of animals, the background of animals, the history of animals is all important. And with adoption, a lot of times you don't have access to that. This becomes relevant more later on, but I can't, or at least I couldn't, adopt a dog when I had small kids, like kids under 5. They don't often, most rescues don't want to put a dog into that kind of environment. And I get it, and I get why. And people can lie and say that they're experienced with dogs and they aren't, and all the rest, but I digress. I'm not going to get into the soapbox debate of adopt, don't shop versus buying a purebred from an ethical breeder. that's not what this conversation is about. And maybe we'll get there at some point. But honestly, I think there's just so much animosity around it on both sides that it's not really worth getting into. There are people far more educated than I am on it, and I'll let them have the discussion. What I do want to talk about was my process of finding the Alaskan Klee Kai. Alaskan Klee Kai is both singular and plural. On occasion, I will slip in an S. It's just me and English and, a slip of the tongue. So if I say Alaskan Klee Kais, I know it's wrong, but it may happen. Forgive me. So here I am, knowing that I want to get a dog for my birthday, knowing that my husband and I are dog people and we're super excited to have a new pet, knowing that it's not going to be a puppy, so we're going to know finish size, we're going to know personality type, and a whole bunch of other things if we do our due diligence. I don't know a lot of medium-sized dogs, and barring the conversation we just had about terriers, I don't know a whole lot of small dogs. I started looking online, I started taking the what dog is right for you quizzes, and then one day at a bookstore, I started flipping through, I think it was a DK book on dogs, one of those big, encyclopedias of photos. And there was a little sidebar that couldn't have been more than 4 inches that was talking about the Alaskan Klee Kai. And I'd never heard of an Alaskan Klee Kai before. And I had never seen an Alaskan Klee Kai before. All I knew is that there was a little picture that looked like a husky, and it said it was no more than 30 pounds. And I was, that might work. So I delved into the world of Alaskan Klee Kai. And at that point, it was still a new enough breed with not a lot of celebrity interest. So the information online really came from the breed clubs and actual owners. I managed to get in touch with quite a few people. We were emailing back and forth. Eventually, I was introduced to the late Carolyn Zinzer, who at the time was the vice president of the Alaskan Klee Kai Association of America. She had been showing dogs for a very long time. She had been breeding dogs for a very long time. And she sort of checked all my boxes for what I want to see when I'm looking at dogs. There was decades of health histories and tests, eye tests, blood tests, bone x-rays, all kinds of stuff to kind of show her due diligence on the health side. And then she also was a big believer in showing conformation and not breeding anything that wasn't able to get a champion in conformation. So to make enough points to get the champion title. She had a former show dog who had had 2 litters for her, and she was ready to retire her. The dog was 4 years old, tons of life left, and just ready to kind of move on to a pet home and have some fun. And Carolyn and I went back and forth, emailing, asking questions, getting a feel for one another. And finally I said, okay, let's meet. And we drove down to Pennsylvania with the hopes that we would be coming back with a dog, but also with the understanding that it may not happen. It was a wild weekend. Anyways, I met Klee Kais for the first time in Carolyn's living room. There were quite a few. They were all very excited to see us. And it was just a cool moment to think about having this discussion with this prolific breeder who had been so entrenched in the breed for so long, and taking that knowledge and taking one of her homebreds home with me was awesome. Piper became our first family dog, and she was with us through all the good and all the bad. She was there for the birth of my kids, not present at the birth, but when we took them home from the hospital, she was there. She was there through surgery, good health, bad health, happy times, sad times, moves. She traveled with us, and she was just a huge part of our lives. Quirky, like they all are. I'll get to that later. But she was just exactly what we wanted and exactly what we needed. We did a bunch of, pet obedience classes with her. We did a little bit of agility. She loved it. She loved being center of attention. She loved showing off. Did not love when people would approach her during walks, which again, I'll get to a little bit later. But overall, Piper was just kind of the perfect dog. And in our memory, she'll probably live on as the perfect dog for a very long time. People talk about animals and they talk about your heart animals. You hear, heart horses and heart dogs. And Piper was definitely that for me. As she started to get older, into 14, she really was slowing down. She was having a hard time getting around. She was gaining weight. She was still doing all like the normal dog things, eating, going to the bathroom. She wasn't having accidents in the house. She wasn't, falling down or anything like that, but she just was declining physically. Her hearing, I think, started to go. Her sense of smell definitely was not as good as it once was. And so I started kind of bringing up the idea with my husband of what we were going to do when Piper was gone. Did we want to have no dogs, which would be the first time for our girls? Their whole life had been with a dog. Or did we want to have another dog? And if so, it probably made sense to do a bit of a transition. I have a little bit of history where one of my family dogs, when I went off to university, was showing similar symptoms of physical decline. And my parents got a puppy, and the senior dog did a 180. She gained mobility, she gained energy, she lost some weight, she bossed the puppy around. It was, really, it was an impactful thing in me growing up, and I still think back on it. And so when the same thing started happening to Piper, I thought, if a puppy can make her live for 6 months better than she is now, I think it's worth it. I forgot how much work puppies are. I hadn't had one for over a decade. It was something that, looking back, I probably wouldn't do again. I definitely know our next job will not be a puppy, but it is what it is, and what happened, happened. So I got back into the process of looking for a Klee Kai. When I was looking the first time, it was very gate kept. There were a very small amount of breeders that were recognized and approved through the various societies. There were very few owners, and they all kind of knew one another. Everybody knew everybody, and getting into the club was a long process. So I kind of expected the same thing to happen with the second time. It wasn't. I don't know if it's because I was an existing owner. I do think that helped in a lot of people's minds, pushing me up the list of someone knowledgeable with the breed, who knows what they're doing, who knows how they act and how they are. But I also think they're just more common now. I've seen multiple big name celebrities, football coaches, all kinds of people with Klee Kais. I've seen them in ads now when I'm scrolling through various things. They're just becoming more common. So that's probably part of it as well. This time I was able to find a local breeder in Ontario, semi-local, within 3 hours. I talked, she happened to have a litter, and one of the puppies had been promised to someone who got a bad health diagnosis and just didn't feel like it was acceptable to take a puppy with that hanging over her. So this puppy suddenly became available, and it was offered to my family. I took the girls, I went to go see all the puppies, really liked this one, seemed outgoing and energetic, but I was really on the fence. It's a lot. Puppies are a lot. And I had a lot going on with work. I had some trade shows coming up where I wasn't going to be at the house. I had some other events on site that I knew I was going to be away from home quite a bit. And as presumably the primary caregiver, I didn't think that was particularly fair to get a puppy and then peace out. So I talked with the breeder. I worked out a deal where we got the puppy, we paid for the puppy, but we kept him with her for a couple more weeks. And then I went to go pick him up and bring him home. And then everything shut down. So unbeknownst to me, I ended up getting a COVID puppy, which was not my intention. I know it was a lot of people's intention, but it was not my intention. It was a complete accident. I do think we missed out on some human socialization that would have been really good for him. But all in all, I think he's come out of it as a pretty good dog. He is good with other dogs. He's gentle. He doesn't hurt other people or other animals. He's very shy. It is a characteristic of the breed, so that's part of it. But he's also a big super suck. And if I'm not around, it's life-shattering to him. And that's not what I hoped for with him. I hoped he would be a little bit more flexible on who his person would be or who his people would be. He loves my family. He loves my girls. He gets along well with my husband, but I'm the person that matters to him. And if I leave the house, whether it's literally walking outside to grab the paper and coming right back, or whether it's going out for a meeting for several hours, he acts exactly the same. His world has ended, and he's going to tell me all about it. That kind of leads into what Klee Kais are and why they can be so unique and why they're not a great dog for everybody. In the 70s, Linda Sperlin saw a dog, as the legend goes, that looked like a husky shrunk. And it was at a gas station in someone's car or someone's truck. And there was a little crowd forming around this dog. And Linda, being a dog person and a dog breeder, kind of had a eureka moment of like, there's something there. There's something to look at there, having a husky that was a more companion-sized animal. So she spent the next couple decades working on refining the breed and getting it down to something that could breed true and would come consistently out looking like what she wanted it to look like. Slowly gave breeding rights to other people and slowly but surely developed the Alaskan Klee Kai as we know it today. It is not a mixed breed. It is not a Pomsky. It's not a husky crossed with something else. It's been breeding true now for decades. And in 2020, it was accepted into the Foundation Stock Service of the American Kennel Club. So that's the first step, basically, to becoming a worldwide recognized breed. Klee Kais are smart, they're loyal, they're active, they love their people, they have a very close-knit idea of what a family is and what their pack is. They tend to affix to one person more than others, or two people more than others. Having said that, everyone in the family is part of their lives and important to them. A lot of Klee Kais are aloof with strangers. Most Klee Kais that I have met do not care for people to approach them outside during walks. They get very anxious about it. They're not going to harm the person. They're not going to react in that sort of way. But they just don't want you to come over and pat them without any, sort of indication of who you are or why you're touching them. I've heard them called cat dogs very often, or Klee cats. They have some cat characteristics for sure. One of the cat dog things that has nothing to do with socialization or personality is the fact that they've got a killer jump on them. They're quite strong. and they're very dense as far as their bones. So things that don't seem to be possible are very possible for them. Whim was 8-9 weeks old, teeny tiny puppy, maybe 5 pounds. And he jumped on a snowbank that was 4'5" and just nothing, didn't even try, and scared the crap out of me. They get up on counters. They get up on couches. They love the backs of couches. I've seen people buy cat trees for their Klee Kai. Piper, in her youth, could catch birds out of the air. They're hunters. They have a huge prey drive. Whimsy has brought chipmunks into the house. They're cat dogs. When I talk about Klee Kais, I always have to bring up the fact that just because they look like they look doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fit in with what you want out of a dog. I feel this way about so many dogs. There's so many dogs that are working dogs that want to be outside, that want to be constantly hunting or swimming or whatever. And if you want a dog that's going to hang out and lay at your feet and watch TV with you, that's not the right dog. That's not the right fit. Conversely, if you're someone who's super into going out and running, you probably don't want a snub-nosed, lazy dog. It's just not going to work for what you both are able to do and what you both want out of life. And I think that's where having something that's purpose-bred for years and years and years and years, literally thousands of years, it makes a difference in knowing what you're going to get and being pretty confident at the end of the day that this dog is going to match your energy level and your lifestyle. So you have to be very aware that they need mental stimulation and that they need physical activity. Mental stimulation, I would argue, is probably more important. They need to learn. They need you to teach them things. They need to discover new things, and they need that mental energy directed different ways, or else it can turn really destructive. I've seen Klee Kais that figure out how to open drawers and unlock cages and get outside. It goes terribly wrong. It's better now because, again, more and more people have them and more people are aware of them and what they are and what they can do. But when I first got Piper, I remember the most reported cause of death for Klee Kais was car accidents because they would get out or someone would let them off lead and they'd run after a squirrel and you'd not see them again. Thankfully, that's changed. Klee Kai are great with kids. I've never actually seen any of them ever have an issue, but especially in my house with my babies and now my girls, never had any issues. Piper, when my first daughter was born, wouldn't come near her, but was very concerned whenever she cried or whenever someone would approach her that Piper didn't know. She would get very concerned and she would let me know she was concerned. I have a wonderful memory of my first daughter being about 1.5, somewhere in there, and she was playing in a sandbox at our in-laws' house, and the next door neighbor had a Weimaraner that they let out into the backyard, and there was a fence between them, but Piper gave the dog a bit of flack and then ran around the sandbox, peeing on all 4 corners outside the sandbox, and then sat between the sandbox and the Weimaraner. And that was just Piper. You know, she protected her family in the way she knew how. We lost her last year. She was 15. She would have been 16 had she gotten to the end of the year. Both my Klee Kais have been December birthdays, weirdly. But she lasted a lot longer than we expected. We got Whim thinking that, if we got 6 months out of Piper, it would be great. And we ended up getting almost 2 years. So that was awesome. The end was really hard because she wasn't able to walk on her own anymore. We had to kind of carry her from the bedroom to where she was laying downstairs, outside, and back in. She was still eating and drinking. She was still somehow managing to go to the bathroom only outside. But I had a friend who was a vet tech kind of say to me, what quality of life does she really have left? And it was hard to let her go. But at the end of the day, we wanted to do what was right for her. And so now Whim is the only dog. And as far as my girls are concerned, he's going to be the one that they remember the most. But I hope that a little part of them remembers Piper, if for no other reason than through us, because she was our first family dog and she was important. And she'll stay important. I would say I'm sorry to get weepy, but I think honoring the memory of an animal or a person with tears is nothing to be sorry about. It shows the emotion that was there and the love that was there. Although I can imagine you aren't here for the tears. So Whimsy is our Klee Kai now. He's a bi-eyed, which just basically means he's got one blue eye and one brown eye. Piper had 2 brown. I've never particularly cared one way or the other. There's also green-eyed, there's amber-eyed, and there's party eye, which basically means that in one eye there's multiple colors. Both of them were also black and whites. Klee Kais started as black and whites and gray and white, and then you would get the occasional offshoot of full white, which is a disqualifying fault in showing. There's also a sort of reverse white, which is a super dark marked dog with very little white at all. Sometimes they grow out of it, sometimes they keep it, and if they keep it, it's another disqualifying fault. Later on in breeding, red started cropping up, and they're becoming more and more common, I think, because they're a popular color. They look very much like foxes to me. I think they're cute. I prefer the black and the red, but I think that the gray has a very wolf, little mini wolf-like look. So black and white, gray and white, red and white are the 3 acceptable colors. There's 3 different sizes: toy, mini, and standard. Both of mine have been tall minis. They go by height at the shoulders, not weight. So you can have a mini that weighs less than a toy, just depending on its build. I like the mini. I think it's a great size. The toys, I've seen some very, very nice toys. I've also seen some toys that really have sort of like the bug-eyed Chihuahua look, which is not appealing to me at all. And then the standards, I've just never interacted with any. I've never been around any. And then some do go oversized, in which case it would again be a disqualifying fault. They are double coated, which basically means that they're going to shed every day, all year long. Twice a year, it's crazy because they actually release the entire undercoat as the new undercoat grows in. So winter and spring, you'll get bags and bags and bags of Klee Kai fur. I honestly think someone should figure out a way to make wool out of it because it's so much. It feels like it's more than the whole dog itself. Klee Kai owners get a kick out of sharing pictures of piles of fur next to their dog to each other. We all like to see who has the furriest of the furries. So is a Klee Kai for you? Do you like doing stuff? Do you like traveling with your pet? Do you like training and kind of always coming up with new games to play? Are you interested in agility? Are you interested in scent work? Do you want to go and paddleboard with a dog? Do you want to go mountain biking with a dog? Do you want to hike mountains with a dog? Klee Kais can definitely be that for you. They need a lot of socialization. They need a lot of patience and time to get them used to being alone, to get them used to being with strangers. I highly recommend crate training. Both of my dogs have been happier when they have kind of a home where they can get away from visitors and where they know where they're sleeping and what's expected out of them. When he's tired, he goes and puts himself into his crate and he lays down and yells at us to come to bed. That's sort of how you want it to be. You don't want the crate to be this awful thing that they're, screaming to get out of. Are you okay with noise? Klee Kais don't bark per se. I have heard some bark, especially in groups. I think they tend to bark a bit more, but on their own, they yodel and they chirp and they sing and they scream at you. If you've ever heard huskies talking, it's kind of like that, just higher pitched and somehow louder. I've had Klee Kais in apartments. I've had Klee Kais in houses. I think houses is better for a couple different reasons. One, it spreads the fur out over multiple levels, so it's not quite so obvious. Kind of joking, kind of not. The other is that with an apartment, you really, really have to make an effort to go outside, to take long walks, to hike and exercise that body and that brain. You have to do training. You have to be in some kind of dog class or your own kind of training situation where you're consistently coming up with new and interesting things for them to do and learn. If you happen to get a super loud one, you may run into issues with being in the apartments because it just depends on how your neighbors are. So I would never say you can't keep a Klee Kai in an apartment. I would say it comes with a little bit more concerns than having one in a house. Are you someone who does not like strangers walking up to you? Don't get this dog. Having a Klee Kai on the end of a leash means that anyone who passes you is going to stop you and ask you questions. What kind of cross is that? What is it? How old is it? Is that a puppy? Can I touch it? Can I pick it up? It's fine. And it's something that, again, Klee Kai owners kind of joke about. I actually know a couple owners who walk around with business cards in their pockets that are little factoids about Klee Kais and a link to various websites for more information. It's all good fun and it's not meant to be nasty, but it is sort of one of those things where just people don't see them all the time. They're not a lab. They're not a Dalmatian. They're not a Yorkie. They're not something that people are just super familiar with. And so they want to know and they want to learn. And that's totally fine with me. I like talking to people. I like interacting with people in that way. And I do like educating people about the breed. I fell in love with them. I want other people to fall in love with them if it's a good breed for them. But if you're someone who really gets anxious if a stranger tries to talk to you in an elevator, or if you just like keeping your head down and, walking to public transit and really, having your earphones in and not paying attention to those around you, this is going to be a dog that's going to induce some anxiety because people are going to want to see it and people are going to want to talk to you about it. If you're somebody who's looking for a dog, if you're going to get really picky about what the eye color has to be and what the coat color has to be prepared to wait 1 to 2 years before you get a puppy that matches with what you're looking for. And that's if the breeder you're working with even specializes in that coat color and that eye color. You're probably going to have to fill out a fairly extensive questionnaire. If you're not asked to, if you're not given history of the parents and the grandparents and the puppies, if you're asked to pay the same amount as it would cost you to go and adopt a dog at the Humane Society, run, don't walk. All in all, they're pretty healthy. I think it's factor 7 or factor 8, I can never remember. It's a blood clotting disorder that was in the breed, especially back when I got Piper, but has sort of been bred out more and more. I haven't seen it in anybody in a really long time. Having said that, I obviously don't know every Klee Kai on the planet, so it is something to look out for. Laxing patellas, it's something that with small dogs you kind of just see. Young cataracts was also something that I used to see in the breed. Most breeders I know test their dogs, so the cataract thing isn't as much of an issue with all of the x-ray tests and the blood tests and bone density tests. You can avoid a lot of these things. I took Piper to the vet for a non-annual shots visit once, and knock on wood, I've never taken Whim to anything but his annual exams. They're pretty healthy dogs, assuming you do your due diligence and get them from someone who's concerned about health. So that's everything that I can think of off the top of my head about Klee Kais. I'm sure there's stuff I haven't covered. If you have questions, ask them. I'm happy to answer whatever you want to know. I really do love talking about the breed. I really do think that they are very cool dogs for very specific types of people. And I think if you're someone who is kind of interested in them and kind of wants to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, join a Facebook group of owners. Get online and ask some questions to people who have them. We're pretty blunt about, what is and isn't good about this breed and what people do and don't think of with this breed. So yeah, I think that just about covers it. This has been Just the Facts Man, Alaskan Klee Kai edition. Thanks so much for hanging out. If you're into it, please like and subscribe. It's very helpful for me. And hope to see you next time. Thanks.